This is the second episode in a 4-part series on the timeout procedure. In the first episode, we briefly reviewed the history and reasons for using a timeout as a parenting tool to help children learn. If you missed that episode, please consider going back to catch it. It will give you a better foundation for what is to come. This episode is titled Before the Timeout. We will talk about setting some of the key elements of preparing for a timeout to ensure that it's successful over time. When you, as a parent, feel more confident and prepared, you will have greater success in using this positive parenting tool. The first step in preparing for an effective timeout procedure is getting a baseline. Getting a baseline means keeping track of the number of times or severity of the problem behavior, or for how long the problem behavior occurs. You're looking at behaviors that can be described as disrespectful or aggressive. So how big or bad is the problem behavior? How many times have you tried to correct the behavior and it still happens? Is your child talking back many times each day or only once a week? Are you frustrated your child is hitting or spitting multiple times each day when they don't get their way or don't get what they want? Or is it only once in a great while when they're overtired? Knowing this information can help you, as a parent, assess how serious the situation is and how much work you'll need to invest to begin to correct it with your child. Please go back to episode 7 on keeping track of behaviors to review how to assess how bad the behavior is and if your intervention is working. This will save you a lot of time and reduce frustration in the long run. Possibly one of the most important elements in preparing for a timeout procedure is deciding where the timeout location or locations should be. There are several straightforward guidelines to follow. Timeout procedures should occur in a safe, well-lit, and well-ventilated area. Relatively quiet environments that are free from distractions like electronics, screens of any sort, phones, video games, are a good place to consider for timeout. Parents often consider using 2 possible locations, and for very good reason I'll talk about in a moment. The first location that many parents choose is a child's bedroom. Before we go further, I want to emphasize that there has been no research to support that timeout procedures in a child's bedroom contribute to anxiety related to sleeping in their room. Again, much of how the child experiences a timeout depends on how the parent implements it. When a parent remains calm during a timeout procedure, children generally are less distressed. Some evidence-based programs like Triple P suggest using 2 different places that the child can use to calm themselves down. They refer to one place as the quiet time and the second place as the timeout. The benefit of having 2 options is it gives the child a choice. You may recall in episode 36 that giving the child a choice often increases their cooperation. You have to be sure that you're comfortable with either choice that you give the child. You decide what those 2 choices are going to be. If you recall from several previous episodes, children, even when they're upset, are more likely to cooperate when they have some say in the consequence. Giving children a choice with certain conditions allows them to self-regulate and for you, the parent, to gauge how regulated they are at that moment. I like to encourage parents to think through every element of the timeout procedure. If families decide to have 2 spots, it is best to identify one that is closer to where the family activities occur, like around the corner, but out of sight. The second spot can be a more private area, often a bedroom. Every home is different, so there's no universal recommendation for where to establish a timeout spot. Again, it is best if the space that is used is safe, well-lit, and well-ventilated. The first spot you may want to consider is a place that is not too far from the center of activity of the family, but also not a place that can become the center of attention. Having a spot around the corner, at the bottom of steps, in a corner of a living room or dining room are all possible options. Again, safety is key. When the child is in that spot, we want them to succeed in self-regulating. It is helpful to not put yourself in a situation where you have to watch them constantly. This can quickly escalate into the child keeping your attention by moving around and making noises that are distracting. Instead of being in a timeout, your child can turn this into a center stage attention-getting opportunity. For example, if you want to use a chair or couch in a corner for the child to be in during the timeout, should they sit on the chair, or can their toe be on the chair while they're laying on the ground? Or can they stand or jump on the chair? The problem with monitoring the situation is that the child is not self-regulating, and their antics are creating a performance that you are the audience to. You might want to be watchful that this doesn't happen. The second spot is sometimes a little further away from the center of family activity. It is most often a bedroom or some other space where the child can go to calm down, and it's not the hub of activity. Bedrooms are most often used because they have a door. This has several advantages for you and for the child. I suggest putting the child in charge of the door. They can choose to keep the door open so long as they're quiet and remain in the room. If they keep coming out of the room, the door is closed. Again, this is part of helping children self-regulate. They may choose to close the door. It's up to them. Remember, giving children a say in parts of the procedure that you can live with is one important way to encourage compliance. You might be wondering what a child can or should do in a timeout. That thought will be addressed in episode 43, part 3, during the timeout. I want to talk a little bit about self-regulation. The purpose of a timeout is to teach the child to regulate themselves before they engage in the behavior that lands them in timeout. If the parent is constantly engaged with the child in a timeout procedure, arguing with them, watching them, keeping them engaged, then the child is not learning self-regulation. They are coming to expect that it's the parent's job to regulate their emotions. This is only partly accurate. Parents co-regulate with their children from the moment of birth. And across childhood, there's this gradual transition of parent-facilitated co-regulation to more independent self-regulation when it comes to children learning to manage their emotions and make good choices. In future episodes, we'll spend quite a bit of time looking at ways that parents can help their children learn to self-regulate. It is important to explain the timeout to children before you begin using them. An important feature of effective timeouts is introducing your child to the new routine that you're going to be implementing. It is important to be clear about why you're doing this, what the behaviors are that may result in a timeout procedure, where the timeout procedure will occur in the house, what the child can do while in timeout, and how long the timeout will last. Here's a sample conversation of introducing a timeout. Mom or Dad has noticed that when you're angry, you hit your brother or me. Hitting is never okay. Starting today, if you are mad, you can say you're mad. You can ask for help. You cannot hit or harm someone else. If you're unable to control your anger or you hit or harm someone, you will have a timeout. This is where you'll go. You can choose between this quiet time, thinking spot, or you can go to your room. You can only have this choice if you decide right away. By the time I count to 3. If you can't decide, I'll decide for you. You can go on your own, or I can help you to get there. If you come out of your quiet time or timeout spot before your timeout is up, it starts over. The sooner that you're in your timeout spot, the sooner you can come out. While you're in the timeout spot or quiet time, your goal is to calm yourself down and to think about ways you can change your behaviors so you don't keep going into timeout. The timeout begins when you're quiet. I will set the timer for 5 minutes once you are quiet. The timer will ring when your timeout is up. If you come out or interrupt before the time is up, I'll reset the timer. It's really important to not solicit your child's approval for the idea. This is not up for a vote. You, the parent, are in charge. As you might imagine, kids are not really excited about this new procedure. They will likely not be happy about it. Why would they be? This is not a reason to abandon the procedure. Remember, this is not punishment for your child. This is a tool you may need to use to help your child to make better choices as to how they treat others. In the long run, it is beneficial for their social and emotional development. Parents often ask how long a timeout should last. The general recommendation from child development experts is that a timeout should be about 1 minute for every year of age. So a 2-year-old receives a 2-minute timeout, and a 10-year-old would receive a 10-minute timeout. This is a soft formula. Sometimes the child and the parent may need a little longer to calm down. There are some additional considerations related to time. The first is that the timeout doesn't start when you give the command for your child to go to timeout. The timeout begins when your child is in their timeout spot and quiet. It makes little sense to bring a 4-year-old out of timeout after 4 minutes if they are still crying or tantruming. The purpose of the timeout is to allow the child to self-regulate, to calm down. Sometimes it may take the child several weeks to figure out that they can come out from a timeout much sooner if they don't fuss or tantrum as long. A second consideration for timeout procedures for young and early elementary school-age children is that they can't tell time. 5 minutes can seem like an eternity to them, and one way to keep you engaged in a negative interaction is by repeatedly asking if they can come out now. Can I come out now? Can I come out now? Can I come out now? Many of you have heard this already. Parents can use a timer on the kitchen microwave or their cell phone to let the child know the time is up. Sometimes it can be helpful to measure the length of time in music. A 6-year-old's timeout procedure may last as long as 2-3-minute long songs. The songs themselves can become part of the positive distraction that helps the child calm down. Still, others may find it helpful to measure time through completion of a simple task, such as putting together a 10-piece or a 25-piece puzzle or coloring a picture. You would have to know your child well enough to trust that they would only color the paper. Again, it depends on the child and your familiarity with what they could do to calm themselves down. It's important to remember to follow through and not threaten. One final consideration for preparing for the timeout procedure is to be confident in your own ability to follow through. Timeout procedures can become confusing to children if they have a timeout some of the time, a warning once in a while, and no consequence at all at other times for the exact same behavior. It also reduces their trust in your ability to follow through if you are only warning the child about the timeout but never follow through. Remember, disrespect and aggression are the only two really good reasons for using a timeout. Once the words have been spoken or the harm has been done, it makes little sense to simply give a warning. This only reinforces a child's experience that they get a free opportunity, a freebie, to say or do something that they know is not okay. And while it may be a good idea to let the child know when they are starting to cross a line with attitude, it is never okay to let an act of aggression, like hitting a sibling, go with only a warning. This may only reinforce the belief that they can hit their sibling once each day with no consequence. Timeouts can occur outside the home. Children don't only misbehave at home. It is not uncommon for parents to feel helpless when the acting up occurs in a grocery store, at a playground, or at a relative's or a friend's house. I recommend starting the procedure at home so you and your child can get used to this process and your child knows that you mean business. However, it would also be helpful to anticipate problems and identify where in the store or in the parking lot, in your car, or where at grandma's house the timeout will occur. Again, it's helpful to calmly inform your child that if they need to take a break or have a timeout while away from home, this location is where it will occur. To recap, we've discussed how to set up a timeout procedure. We've discussed having 2 locations to allow some choice and flexibility with your child in deciding where they can go to self-regulate. We discussed a general formula for how to determine how long a timeout should be, 1 minute for each year of age. After the child is in their quiet time, calm down spot, thinking corner, or timeout, whatever you choose to call it. We discussed how to introduce this to your child and the importance of follow-through and consistency. If your goal is to help your child self-regulate and make better choices, then timeout procedures are a super helpful tool for your parenting toolbox. What 2 locations make the most sense for you to use with your child? Once you've decided to use the timeout tool, how and when will you talk with your child or children about it? It is best to do this when you are calm and can communicate that you want to help them to learn to control themselves better. What will be the best way to keep track of progress? Does keeping track of the frequency of timeouts make sense to you as a way of measuring progress? I'm hoping it does. What will be the best way to help your child know how long the timeout is? Do you have a timer or some other means to help them? Give some thought to what you have tried with timeouts in the past. Does it match up with the information presented in this episode? Could it become part of your toolbox in creating more effective ways to teach your child or children? What parts of this episode make the most sense to you? Hopefully, you'll continue to see that there's a difference between using a timeout as a form of punishment and using a timeout as a way to help children to self-regulate and learn. Remaining calm, careful, thoughtful planning, and enforcing of the timeout procedure is crucial for it to be successful. Thank you for tuning in and considering this parenting topic. I hope that this information added to your growing toolbox for parenting your child or children. Please consider exploring other topics in this series. Remember, no one parenting tool can do everything. We need many tools to become the best parents for our children. Your children's future depends on you and the time and effort you invest in them today.